Hey you, thanks for stopping by. I'm not gonna stall. Instead, I want this to be as quick of an intro as possible. You is my all-time favorite show, and one of the biggest debates among the fan base is how it should end, and there are countless ways in which it could be done. So before we get season 5, which at this point in time is slated to be the final season, I thought I'd take a crack at my own vision of how the fifth and final season should go. First thing I want to say before I get into it is that this is a fanwrite, meaning I want you to look at it as a fan fiction, and by that I mean a story taken into a direction that wouldn't exactly happen if it was written by the officials. But at the same time, I'm also going to be as realistic as possible. I'm going to carefully build off of what we've gotten for the past 4 seasons and the past 4 books. Shout out to the author Caroline Kepnes, which is why I'm calling it a fan write and not just calling it a fan fiction, because I want it to be a realistic writing experience of what we would possibly get from season 5, without limiting it to a fan fiction where it's supposed to be a kind of dream world scenario, where the fans get everything you want, like a fan service. So don't expect anything too crazy. Expect nothing but creativity in conjunction with something naturally derivative from the real deal. The second thing is, as you is typically 10 hours a season, with many different plots, both big and small, happening throughout that amount of time, that would be a lot of different levels of story for me to come up with. So this is going to be essentially done in summarized episodes, covering only the main plots for those episodes. Lastly, there's not going to be any dialogue or me being in Joel's head unless I'm reading a particular quote that needs to be underlined. This is basically going to be just me telling the story from an outside point of view. Now, let's dive right in. Episode 1. Joe exits the Lockwood building while watching the news on his phone. He is greeted by numerous pedestrians as he walks by them, and occasionally intimidates a few. Some step out of his way out of respect for him and everything he's been through. Some share a grotesque look at him. Others feel threatened enough to call him out on the possibility that he's not who he's had to meet to make him out to be. He doesn't care, because to him, there are no loose ends, not enough to send him to court. His partner's company has the media wrapped around her pinky, and speaking of which, most importantly, he's happy. He's found love. He's found Kate, the love of his life, who restored his peace and keeps him good, while he does the same for her, of course. At the end of Joel's walk, he finally arrives at Mooney's Rare and Used, fully restored after nearly closing not long after his venture to Los Angeles. Through the shelves, he spots a woman with a very obvious, shiny necklace, pearls. He approaches the other side of this aisle she just walked into for a better gander, and when she bends over, he finally decides to make a direct approach. The woman stands back up with books in tow, and no, it's not anyone that Joe is obsessed or coming to be obsessed with. It's Mooney's old caretaker, Bridie, taking inventory. Joe gives her a startle. He asks why is no one at the register, and her response is that Curtis said he had an emergency. Joe then asks, "Is he here yet? Can I see him?" She says of course, you know where to find him. Joe then goes into the basement to find Mooney, resting peacefully in an urn. He has numerous flashbacks, from not only the different times Mooney abused him, but also when he first arrived at Mooney's doorstep from the Irving Group Home for Boys, when he introduced him to Beck, and, of course, to his memorial service, where he shamelessly told a story about how he got disciplined for stealing Mooney's car to take a girl out, but then was asked the important question of whether or not he received oral sex from said girl, causing a chain of laughter in the attendees. Out of respect for Kate, he leaves out the part where he received oral in the back seat by none other than Candace Stone, who he still doesn't know where the remains of are. Same for Delilah. Bridie then comes down and reminds Joe that Mooney really loved him. On their way back up, Joe expresses his concerns about Bridie always letting Curtis have the run of the mill, seeing as he's known Ethan, who has recently been engaged to his fiancée, Blythe. While they're talking, they are surprised by a flying book that comes crashing through the window. Even better, the book is also on fire. It's a copy of Caged, a radical couples therapy technique, written by Sherry and Carrie Conrad. The two ducked for cover and weren't harmed. As Joe takes care of the mess, he tells Brian not to worry. He also thinks to himself that thankfully, the book doesn't speak much to what kind of man he is, and it mostly focuses on love and even admits that she was calling the shots. He also notes that this attack on the bookstore might be a response to getting the book banned from all major bookstores. When Joe makes it home, he accesses his hidey hole and scours through a burner phone from it. There he searches through various outlets, using the same app that he once thought he was using to talk to Reese. It includes a direct line to Madre, Chief of Police, the cybersecurity team, journalists, the list goes on. At his fingertips, he has substantial resources that he gained upon being given another chance at life. More particularly, he has a PI investigating the Quinn family unbeknownst to what they're looking for exactly, a reporter keeping an eye out for any recent bodies of missing people that have been found out in the open, and a special legal counselor on standby. Little do they know, the PI is meant to discover the whereabouts of Candace and Delilah's remains, assuming the Quinn family is aware. The reporter is keeping an eye out for any news reporting the death of Marianne Bellamy, and the counselor is an emergency safety blanket in the event that Nadia breaks her silence. When asked by the reporter if they should plan a trip back to Europe just to be extra safe, Joe says not yet, as first he has to pay a visit to someone in Madre. When Kate arrives home, they talk about their day. In doing so, she asks if anyone was hurt by the incident at Mooney's. But not only that, they talk about the essence they carry in each day they wake up, as things have changed tremendously for the two of them in recent times, and the biggest changes have yet to come. But they're both grateful that it's their other half that they change and grow with. Joe, willing to do anything for Kate, and Kate who will do anything for Joe, will they both keep each other on the path of right. Whether that's keeping them out of the dark, doing good for the world, or helping the other be able to look themselves in the mirror. Before she heads down for the night, she asks Joe if there's anything else she needs to know. Joe assumes that she's referring to today. Nothing else comes to mind. Lastly, she also wonders why he's sitting in the silent dark and turns the TV on to the amusing announcement of Goldberg for mayor, kicking off the season with a run for office. Episode 2. Taking us back to the start of the very same day, we see Joe once again getting interviewed, with of course Cynthia standing by, and Kate on the sidelines for a change, as this one is more focused on the man who went from faking his death to philanthropy. The interview explores a variety of topics, some of which had to have been shut down by Cynthia to avoid disrupting the press and Joe's PR image, such as his thoughts on the Conrad's book. However, there were some topics that Joe was eager to discuss, namely what his plans are for his child. As acknowledged before, the public does believe that he made a sensible choice in order to protect his child from Love Quinn and the child welfare system. But what now, since he's come back from that endangering situation? Well, Joe starts off by saying that he left his child in very capable hands, and that hands don't have to swap anytime soon, long as his son is still safe. He's in contact with his son's legal guardians, and he knows where to find them. But the best thing for that offspring of his now is that he has parents that can stay proactive for him. And Joe still has a lot of work to complete before he can say that he's ready to step in and be a full-time father. So it looks as though Joe still cares about Henry and is still interested in taking him in, but doesn't want to subject him to having a father that is a business owner while also playing an important role in one of New York City's largest foundations that has also launched 2 art schools, when he already has 2 parents that are already raising him full-time, which has been a dream of theirs for years. Kate adds that while she would love to be a mother, she would rather wait until the time is right for both of them, leading the interviewer to ask if she sees herself taking in Joe's child with him, or having another child together. And without hesitation, she expresses her eagerness to do both, causing Joe to light up, excited about the idea of giving Henry a little sister. Before they wrap up, Joe is asked about the rumors that he may be running for office, to which he answers, "To that I say, keep an eye on the news," before having to leave for Mooney's. Instead of following Joe, we stay on Kate, who has an important discussion with Cynthia after dismissing the interviewer. Cynthia states that their informants that work for the London Police Department are reporting that in the investigation of the murder that took place outside of Joe's flat tied to the death of Reese Montrose, that no camera footage was recovered. Everyone, including them, is still uncertain about what exactly happened there. All Kate knows for certain is that it was Joe that killed Reese, but they do have their suspicions. Cynthia says that she was for Kate's father, therefore she's not for Kate. And while she is for Joe as well, and for them as a union, Kate needs to monitor him more closely to make sure he isn't up to anything that can destroy what her father's built and prepared for her. Kate agrees, which is why she plans to go with him on this trip back to California. Cynthia suggests that she goes further than that, by making sure that she knows everything she needs to know about Joe before eloping. Next day, at the privately held camping launch party, Joe and Kate raise a toast. Joe declares his run with the intended purpose of ensuring that no kid in New York has to grow up even remotely similar to the way he did, and that in the event of an untimely death of a dependent upon relative, that there are programs and resources available to them. He believes that more should be invested into group homes so that there are more acceptable options, along with a faster but secure adoption system that encourages more workers to keep the line moving, and more programs that encourage youth to give birth rather than execute so that more people can start families. If it can't be done the traditional way, and it's not just about the kids, Joe wants businesses to thrive, for places with a good cause to stand a good chance and have more opportunities, to get the homeless off the streets and into their own system, something more colorful than what goes on late at night in New York past 10 p.m. He wants to make the city the place he wishes it was growing up, a place Mooney would have been less miserable in, and then rinse and repeat, so that the country can know how it's done. Joe is going to tackle New York's dark other half head on, as mayor. He won't be perfect in doing so, but he will sure as hell try. Not only for himself, not only for Kate, but for the world that he might one day bring a child into. That's who it's for. Before Joe can take in the applause, Kate has their guests hold it, while she dedicates her toast to how lucky she is. The better part of her life was crappy before she met him, and while she at least thought she had some sort of escape, she later learned that nothing truly took her away from it all. Not like he has. She feels motivated, without doubt, and like a better person each morning that they wake up next to each other. And she can't wait to see the domino effect of a better world when the city of New York gets a taste of it with him as mayor. And on that note, the New York's finest power couple not only get double the applause they were about to get before, but a standing ovation as well. While they stand and applaud, Joe looks toward the first thing he can spot that gives off a reflection, and when he does, it's just him. They join their guests, and the party continues. The first guest they tend to is a special visitor all the way from Thailand, who once put the lady in Phoebe. She gives Joe a big warm hug, congratulating him on his candidacy. She warns him not to give her any rubbish about not winning yet, because if the city has half a brain, then he has the election in the bag. However, Kate says that's what she's worried about. When Phoebe asks if Roald is going to make it, she tells her, oh no. He opted to, but that she shut it down. Joe suddenly remembers that he still hasn't told her about Roald's perversion towards her, namely the upskirts. Given his aversion to Roald, Joel takes that as his signal to browse through some of the other guests. He sends Phoebe his goodbyes, pecks Kate on the cheek, and as he turns, he's met with a familiar face that says, "Are you going to avoid me forever, Will?" And who might this be? Two people come to mind who would not only refer to Joe as Will, but get invited to a special occasion, one of which would be, well, Will. But this person's much shorter. Joe's face lights up as Ellie Alves leans in to give Joe a hug. While her face isn't as well lit as Joe's, she is in her own way happy to see him. Joe knows how Ellie is, and her accepting the round-trip plane ticket from Florida to New York is all the confirmation he needed about where they are with each other. Speaking of which, Ellie calls this in-person appearance her confirmation, as she couldn't believe the news out of Madre Linda, but didn't lose hope when the money and books never stopped arriving in the mail. But even then, even after the news of his rise from being legally dead, she couldn't quite believe she still had her only reliable support system until now. Even in psychosis, he never abandoned her. As she realizes this, Ellie stares deep into his eyes that she once couldn't bear to look at, as her eyes start to fill with tears, naturally causing her to lean right back into his arms for a proper embrace, as she starts to choke up. Joe doesn't know if she's experiencing relief from his well-being, mourning Delilah's death, or both. But from the look of Ellie's face on the other side of that hug, which Joe can't see, it's still clear that she's angry. The question is at who? She's still unclear on who took her sister away from her. But at the same time, one thing that has been made clear to her is that Joe admittedly killed Henderson and later outlived the woman he married, whose surname comes from the family of which she considered to be dangerous people to wrap up with. Does she consider Joe to be an honest survivor? When they finally let go, Joe tells her that it's great to see her and act what it's like being what's basically a full-grown adult. Her answer is that being basically 16 had better perks, but that she'll make it work. In his head, Joe recounts a summary of all that's happened to her since then, which involves a slowly but surely growth on social media, advocating for abuse victims, occasionally getting a scoop on various corrupt individuals, making her in demand, and recently landing a full-ride scholarship to Los Angeles Film School after a short film she revised went viral. But before they could get into what's new, Joe is interrupted by an incident that catches his attention. It's Rold trying to bypass the security guards to make it in. He yells for Kate numerous times as he disrupts the event. Joe approaches the altercation between Rold and the guards as they struggle to hold him back. Joe ironically tells him that she's not interested and that he needs to not be so obsessed with her. If she wanted him here, he'd have no trouble getting in. Rold fires back with, "And if she wanted to keep you, you'd already be married." Joe reminds him that as long as they've been so-called friends, he's never gotten even remotely as close to Kate as he has. This gives Rold the aggravation necessary to power through the security, who let a bit of their guard down with time, and he charges right at Joe. Since Rold has been known to put Joe's life in jeopardy, even with others in the room, he responds by stabbing Rold in the heart, so that nothing can ever come of Rold's obsession with Kate and beef with Joe ever again. But then he snaps out of it, remembers that he's on good behavior streak, and can't show anyone who he once was. So instead he steps back quickly, with the hope that Rold doesn't manage to land a good lick. Right as Rold makes it to him, Curtis stands between the two, holding him off just in time for the guards to reapprehend him, while telling him to take his drama and envy someplace else. Joe tells him that he might not be the best at making it to work on time, but was glad to see him perfectly on time for something. They have a laugh and shake hands as Curtis gives his congratulations. Later that evening, Joe and Kate have a one-on-one dinner to celebrate more privately. They do a lot more gazing than talking, but the first thing Joe says to her is that he can't stop thinking about her speech at the launch party, not to mention how much more complete he feels every day that he wakes up next to her, and how much growth he feels as an individual since leaving the hospital together. She's touched, and of course, they share a kiss. Before their lips detach, Joe looks into her spoon to check his reflection again, and of course, Kate, being as aware as she is, catches him. So she breaks the kiss and asks him if everything is alright. Joe affirms that everything has never been better, and Kate takes the opportunity to ask a question on the topic of the day he was discharged. Did anything else happen that day? While Joe has opened up to her in a way that he has with no one else before, certain truths can still be damaging to what they've built. He maintained his hope that one day he can tell her absolutely everything that's happened since he made it to London, and everything he missed before then that he hadn't had the chance to get to. But until then, he must remain clueless about what she could be referring to. And luckily enough, before she can grill him, the alarm goes off at the school. Cutting their dinner short, they arrive at Kate's art school too late to see who vandalized it, ruining most of the main lobby before it could be officially opened, essentially delaying its release by a few months. Kate says that it appears as though someone doesn't want Joe to be mayor, and he, thinking to himself, knows that it's her school, not his, so that what it really means is that someone doesn't want her to be happy, particularly someone who would hate to see them get married. So Joe officially declares another round with Rold, and this time, they both can't make it out of the fire alive. Episode 3. Unfortunately, due to Joe's pre-existing plans, he himself can't have it out with Rold just yet. As Joe collects his luggage, someone in a "well-behaved women really make history" t-shirt volunteers Joe to take a selfie with them. Joe lets them have it, as he gives them a half-enthusiastic smile for the photo. The same person attempts to get one with Kate, who refuses. To avoid another Mooney's incident, Kate delegates her security to stand closer to Joe, who chuckles and says that won't be necessary. After a long drive from the airport, Joe finally arrives at the residence of Donsan Landing, where he sees his son for the first time since he left from there. Upon Joe being let in, Henry stands there, confused. Joe freezes, and he starts to fall apart inside as his eyes fill up similarly to the way Ellie's did. He bends his knees, lowering himself as he spreads his arms out, and smiles as Henry's face lights up as he rushes toward him. Joe isn't exactly sure how to explain to himself as to how Henry remembers him, or if he doesn't, why did he still come his way? Other than it being because they're connected through fate. The tear falls as Joe tightens the hug and shifts side to side with Henry until he starts laughing in excitement. Kate observes quietly, with a smile on her face, as she witnesses how much Joe wants to be a father to his kid. Kate, Dante, and Lansing lead the father and son to have every kind of fun, loving, bonding time imaginable, while they have tea in the dining area. Kate makes the bold decision to ask Dante what Joe was like before they know what happened. Lansing describes him as a father who was proactive, always right on time to pick up Henry up, always wanting to know what stories he was read, if he had gotten any better at walking, even wanted him to start potty training very early. Dante describes him as a very empathetic person. He lended his shoulder to people that you wouldn't expect others to look after on a personal level, like his old boss, Marianne. Joe was very supportive of her and a huge help when she was going through a custody battle, Dante says. He even pushed her to pursue her dreams as a children's book illustrator, going out of his way to submit her into contests that she would become finalist for. With that in mind alone, he can only imagine how much of a devoted husband and father he was, and how great of a mayor he could be. Naturally, Kate wants to know more about Marianne, particularly from someone else. According to Dante, she was a delightful mother and librarian who was 4 years sober when she was fighting for custody of Juliet. She was also never afraid to speak her mind, and was determined to turn her hobbies into a dream come true. When Kate asks whatever happened to her, he says that he doesn't know for sure. She disappeared the same night Joe left Henry on their doorstep, but that they didn't get a chance to speak, as she left them a note in the same manner and knocked without saying anything. He believes that she fled to Paris. Lansing asks, wasn't her ex-husband Ryan Goodwin the news guy that got killed by love threatening her? Dante says, yeah, wouldn't put it past him. Behind closed doors, he was working with the judge on this case against Marianne and Joe both saw them shaking hands right after her hearing. While Lansing goes to check on Joe and Henry, Dante gets up for another cup of tea, which he offers Kate some of. She declines, and then asks if she may see the note that Marianne left. He pulls it out of his pocket. He never lets it out of his radar. Kate discreetly snaps a picture of it before Lansing gets back. Lansing observes as Joe and Henry playfully brawl in the grass, but with huge smiles on their face. Lansing asks if they're having fun, to which Joe replies, is it that obvious? Lansing was actually just the person Joe wanted to see, as the reason they came is because he and Kate believes they're ready to start reincorporating Henry into Joe's life before he becomes too busy to even consider it. He'd also like some form of custody in writing, since Joe technically surrendered custody when he faked his death, though he doesn't believe that either of Henry's legal guardians would ever keep his child from him, but you can never be too safe. To Lansing's regret, that thought breathed its last breath right in and there, as Lansing says that that's actually why he's glad they finally came, because they've been wanting to tell Joe in person that they're having doubts about Henry's safety as it pertains to his father. While they have confidence that Love was a monster, the jury is still out on whether or not Joe is a jeopardizing person to be around, both figuratively and literally, as they like to let a judge decide, since there's too much court of public opinion involved in this image. Joe is shocked. He gets up out of the grass and walks toward Lansing, confused. What do you mean, doubts? Like, you think that me and Love were the same? Lansing merely shuts him down. No, most likely not, but it is clear to us that your hands were just about as dirty. And how easy can it be to convince someone to get wrapped up in something like that, unless they were already more than capable? Joe pauses, with a pouty face, before saying, I would like to explain everything, I really would, but first, I'd have to be able to explain to myself. Have you ever been in an abusive relationship? Do you know how exactly you go from point A to point B? You don't. It just happens. You don't sign up for it. You don't see it going downhill. If you love that person, you see it getting better, not worse. And the next thing you know, here we are. All I know now is I'm a good person, trying to be a great person, trying to do good for the world, especially for him. So please, do not keep my child away from me. Lansing says that he and Dante have decided to allow Joe to have his visits for now, that if he wants it to get any better than that, they'll all have to see a judge. Joe didn't leave California with the optimism that he thought he would have, and Kate didn't leave with the same amount of faith in Joe's past as she had when arriving. The level of disappointment in the thought that Henry will be alienated from him even has him considering if there's something that must be done about Lansing. But then you remember that he shouldn't violate his probation per Kate. Not again, he thinks to himself. As he checks his phone for headlines, where he finds reports of a brutal fire that took place at the Airbnb of one Roald Walker Burton. Joe couldn't have it out with Roald himself due to scheduling conflicts, and he could have waited until he was back, but every second Roald went unpunished equals a second he was a risk factor to he and Kate, and consequentially, a risk to Henry's place in their life. However, thanks to Joe's resources, nothing says that Roald can't get his with Joe completely out of the picture, which may be even better. Upon the headlines giving Joe this confirmation, Kate also makes the discovery. "Oh my goodness," she says in shock and concern, as she opts for the driver to change routes. Joe doesn't see this as a good start to the reaction he expected, but then he remembers how Beck reacted to Peach's suicide attempt. Kate goes ahead while Joe begins to sign them both in as visitors until the desk lady recognizes her as a Lockwood and him as a mayor candidate, opting to sign them both in. This gives Joe the opportunity to spy in on Kate's conversation with Roald for a bit while she thinks he's still signing them in. While Kate makes sure he's okay while wishing him a speedy recovery, Roald immediately pins this on Joe, who didn't do it directly, but still. Kate's first thought is that it could be a result of the enemies he's made. After all, he did just accidentally, quote-unquote, shoot a close personal friend, did he not? The way Kate sees it, Joe hasn't been a factor in Roald's life, and vice versa. Therefore, Joe has no real personal reason to do such a thing, and dishonestly contends that he doesn't have the capacity for it either. She even suggests that he's still trapped into the mindset that he had when he believed Joe to be the rich killer. Roald switches gears over to Kate, asking what she plans to do with her life now that Joe, a random guy she just met, is in the picture, and not him, who she's known most of her life. Kate puts it simply. Her heart is telling her she belongs with Joe. Joe is where her heart is at, and Joe is the one who has her heart. Joe makes Kate feel seen. Joe gives Kate hope that not everyone is insufferable, and would like him to be the one she brings more good people into the world with. From the door, Joe smiles as his heart lights up. Kate goes on to say that Roald still has her heart too, but in the same way he always has. If Roald can accept that, then that tells Kate she was right not to invite him to celebration in support of her and Joe. On that note, Joe lets himself in, still wearing the same smile, with nothing to say out loud other than best wishes. Kate says she'll be in the car and gives Joe and Roald time to speak properly and tell the differences, if any. And once Joe senses that Kate is actually gone, Joe tells Roald that they can sell this once and for all in the pit of his backyard when he's done recovering. Roald says that he'll never recover. He'll always look like Two-Face thanks to Joe, and Kate will only see what Joe did to him from here on out. Joe says to maybe take Kate's advice, don't make enemies, and leaves. Roald gets discharged the very day it becomes the slightest bit permissible, and takes him and his belongings straight to the Lockwood residence, late at night when Kate's asleep. He sneaks in the back, where he sees Joe having a drink over a fire. When Joe hears his footsteps, he begins monologuing. "I don't know you all that well, but I'm with Kate, because I love her. Because she makes me feel seen, heard, and understood. I've never felt more recognized. That's got nothing to do with you. I didn't even know you, or any of her friends, when I first laid eyes on her. But you know what? I understand why you hate that about me. The us between me and her. It's not easy being friend-zoned by the same person for basically your whole life. I mean, it can be." Roald cuts him off. Friend-zoned? Don't pretend like you understand my situation. And you certainly don't know what's best for her like I do. Joe continues. You can take your frustration out on me all you want. Life is full of people like that. So slander my good name. Accuse me of being a murderer. Burning your house down. I'm even convinced you're responsible for some of the attacks on Moonies. Go ahead. Punish me. But punishing Kate? Was that really necessary? Roald pretends to not know what Joe's talking about. So Joe proceeds. Come on. She may not be exercising her resources because she trusts you, but I don't. Joe then proceeds to show Roald CCTV footage from cameras of his own that he plays outside Kate's art school, since he didn't like that she wasn't delegating her crew to get cameras set up immediately. While there's no concrete evidence of him vandalizing it, Joel's camera does show someone strikingly similar in appearance to Roald entering not too long before the alarm went off, and leaving immediately after. Joel says that if Roald truly loved Kate and didn't want her wrapped around his pinky for his own personal selfish pleasure, then he'd realize that punishing him is also punishing her, regardless of how he does it, and that he should want her to be happy, first and foremost, even if it isn't with him. And Joe can't have people around like that, those who jeopardize the future they're building that others won't be able to live up to, all because they're envious, and knows it's going to be a while before Kate realizes it. But it's for the best that they don't waste any time. So then Roald asks Joe what he's going to do about it. Joe takes out his burner and presses two buttons, one to deactivate the security cameras and another to dim the lights, which Roald notices, as it prompts him to turn around. When he turns back around, he's immediately met with a blow to the head from Joe, followed by Joe kicking up kindling from the fire onto him, causing his pants to quickly catch flames. As soon as Joe's able to put out the flames on his own shoe, while Roald is fighting for his life, he does the rest by pushing him into the pit, and letting the fire take it from there, as Roald's body is already recovering from an injury of the same nature. A huge weight is lifted from Joe's shoulder when Roald stops showing resistance, or any response for that matter, but that weight is immediately put right back on when Kate shows up at the back door in her nightgown, yelling his name. Episode 4. Joel's first thought is that he guesses Kate didn't take her sleeping pills tonight. This left him with no time to dispose of his shoes, or at the very least come up with an alibi for the circumstances. But that doesn't matter, because unlike Beck, Kate knows better, and unlike Love, Kate understands better, which means she figures that Joel ought to have a great explanation for this relapse. And once she's finally done mourning, wants to know everything. Roald was a danger to Kate, and then a danger to Joe for being with Kate. He wasn't in New York to pay her a visit and support her, he came to New York to make them pay. Joe for getting his girl, and Kate for running off without him. Unless, of course, she came to her senses and completely changed the course of her entire life by dumping Joe and being with him. While Kate believes that there's tension between the two, and that Roald has always had a vendetta against him, she still doesn't see why there's justification for killing a jealous best friend. And when the surveillance of him vandalizing her school only half does it, he searches through Roald's belongings to find something that should take care of the rest. His camera, which still has all of the upskirts of Kate that he had taken over the years. This is when Kate folds. She sees just how dangerous Roald would have been to their union had Joe let him live any longer. But now what are they going to do with him? Kate types in the password to Roald's phone. Yes, she knows it, and thankfully discovers that Roald actually covered his bases. He was smart enough to make others very aware of where he was going to be at that exact time, so that if anything happened to him, it would have incriminated Joe enough to take them both down with him. Kate offers to take the rap and call the New York Chief of Police, who would bring the situation down to a minimum. But Joe says that he can't let her do that. He can't let her put himself between him and Roald. Otherwise, even in death, he gets his way. And the first step to getting clean is to accept the situation for what it is, with complete honesty, in the least incriminating way possible, of course. Which means Joe makes a difficult decision of calling the police himself and telling them what happened. A self-defense gone to the extreme. He leaves at the part where he wasn't necessarily defending himself, but his future. For the first time since he was a kid, Joe is going to be connected to a debt in the eyes of the law. Before the police arrive, he disposes of his shoes and beats himself up to give off the impression that he had to endure more, and therefore had less of a choice to do whatever he did that led to him inadvertently causing Roald to trip into the fire. By fate, Joe was able to make it to the next morning without getting arrested. But the price paid for that is bad press, as everyone's now talking about Joe, and the incident took place the night before. The ones who don't want him to run for mayor are already calling him a murderer, which also adds validity to the idea that he could be a danger to Henry. What doesn't help is that instead of commenting on the situation, because why would they, New York's fastest rising couple have chosen to take a trip back to London in order to check on Kate's other school, quote unquote. Thankfully, their attorneys were able to successfully secure a gag order on the Conrads. Ellie had just missed Joe when she showed up at Mooney's to ask about everything, as this is also further implicates him in Delilah's murder. Curtis can also be seen watching TV at the bookstore, with a great feeling about the situation. He turns and looks at Bridie, who has no words. At Kate's London-based art school, Cynthia scolds her, asking her shouldn't she be keeping an eye on Joe after what he just pulled. Kate says it's fine, as Joe doesn't have a record, the Conrads can't speak, and they greenlit leaks that name rolled as the one who deserved the celebration, implicating him as someone who had been stalking and harassing them since the time they initially left London, further perpetuating the idea that he left Joe no choice. And besides, Kate trusts Joe. Meanwhile, Joe meets up with his reporter at the spot where he left Marianne, and just as he figured, no body. Yet still no report on recovery. This is where I last saw them, he says. According to the reporter, none of their sources have recorded any bodies found in this area in the past 10 years. Either she got up and walked away, or a cannibal necrophiliac got to her first. Joe thinks to himself. When the reporter asks if the potential victim had a phone that he could possibly track, he says no, without explaining that he already tried. When asked where they lived last, Joe says, and their name, nowhere, but they did have a friend sitting for them. When the two track down Beatrice in Paris, Joe finds that this particular flat wasn't where they lived when he had Marianne in his custody. He knows because he left her some funds for Juliet to help with the loss of her mother. Joe wonders, why would she downsize and relocate to a more remote part of the city, especially when given enough money to upgrade? Beatrice leaves and returns numerous times throughout the day, presumably to sit for various clients. This goes on until dusk. When Joe wakes up in the passenger seat of the reporter's car to the sound of the door opening once again, this time it's not Beatrice that comes out, but Marianne in the flesh, confirming what Joe was refusing to believe, with every day that went by without confirmation of her death. As Marianne makes her way down to ground level, Joe's mind goes on a tangent, saying, when a person has an addiction, and they relapse, sometimes they don't just take a break from their sobriety. Instead, they go on a spree to enjoy their recess before it's time to go back inside and work on themselves again. That's why Reese came to me. Before killing Ryan, I hadn't taken anyone down since Henderson, which was all I needed to prepare for the final boss, my now late wife. But that wasn't enough. Satisfying, but not physiologically fulfilling. So, after Elliot gave me a reason to go back to you, Reese took the reins, before I even knew it was him. And well, we know what happened after that, don't we? And here we are, a killing spree and another faked death later. I was doing so well after that before I killed Rold, but now everything's falling apart. And to make matters worse, it turns out you never left. So now Reese would like to say hello one last time, because I have to let you go, Marianne. For real this time. With certainty. Joel then pulls out his burner once again to make another great use of his resources. This time, going back to something he learned from Will, by using a chip to deactivate all surveillance cameras on the lot. The reporter then pulls the car out into the parking lot. Joe, with a disguised appearance, steps out of the car. This alarms Marianne, who has likely been on high alert for a while now. Joe, with a disguised voice, then says, "Thanks, 5 stars," before walking away without making any eye contact with her, or the resident who's just heading into their unit. Marianne, with her eyes bulging wide, rushes toward the reporter's car before he presumably pulls off. "Hi," she says. "Nothing crazy, I promise. It's just that it's getting late, and I don't like to wait out here in the dark for too long, but my Uber is almost 20 minutes away. Is there any chance I could cancel this ride and give you cash to take me now? Please?" She may not recognize Joe, but she can see an imminent danger from a mile away, and the unknown man who just got out of an Uber so close by reminded her of how much danger she could be in if she's out there exposed for too long. The reporter asks where she needs to be at this time of night, and while she explains, she is soon after walked up on by that same unknown man, returning to the vehicle, staring her down as her last sentence fades into silence, while he pulls off his disguise. In the words of Reese, the reflection of whom Joe can see in Marianne's tearful eyes, if some selfish bitch wants to reject after everything you do for her, then she never bloody saw you. After everything, you deserve all you've earned. She needs to understand that there is only one way. She needs to look into your eyes and see the raw, passionate depths of you, and then never see anything again. Joel then pulls out Vic's old piece and wastes no time firing, hearing nothing but a quiet gasp before the bullet makes contact with Marianne's skull. He then quickly hops back into the car, putting its disguise back on as they pull off. The next morning, Kate wakes up Joe, who is blacked out at Sundry House, of all places. Kate, who had been trying to get a hold of him all night, was worried that he was getting himself into more trouble. When asked why he'd bring himself back here, Joe says that it's because it's where he deserves to be after what happened between he and Rold, in which he could have backed down. Again, thanks to Kate's trust, Joe is able to get by with this one. However, that's only until Kate receives a live video from Cynthia of a news station in Paris reporting the death of Marianne Bellamy. Kate holds up the phone to Joe with a more than disappointed look on her face. Episode 5. Since Marianne took a point-blank bullet to the head, with Joe not having enough time to take away some of her belongings, rather than a mugging, it is viewed as an assassination. Had Joe not hit the brink of another association episode, perhaps he would have been more calculating. This of course comes with more consequences for Joe, as Marianne is known as the ex-wife of Ryan Goodwin, one of Love Quinn's victims. Not to mention the fact that she was killed in almost no time after Joe and Kate's arrival. The news has already gone international. It's the #1 story in Paris, London, and New York, as the Americans are already speculating that this was Joe's doing, and using the premise to further back the idea that Joe didn't kill Rold in self-defense. However, not all hope is lost for Joe. His real phone places him at only 3 places: the airport, the hotel, and Sundry House. While he also took a page out of his own book from when he disposed of Natalie and hired a body double to pose as him outside of the art school within a reasonable estimated time frame of Marianne's murder. But even though he can't be tied to this murder due to a number of factors, there's still more preventive measures that need to be taken, and thankfully they can be done remotely. As Kate's dragging Joe back home immediately after she learns of the news of Marianne's death, and unlike law enforcement, along with the press, she has no question that it was him. It's unknown what Joel's play would have been, because Kate doesn't give him a chance to make one. The first night back in New York, she tells him that she knows it was him as she confronts him with Marianne's note that he had no idea about. The note reads, "For my own safety, Juliet's, and yours, I'm going away. Per Quinn. Thank you for everything. And good luck in your life. Au revoir. P.S. Never stop listening to your true love. That voice that's speaking from your heart by way of your gut. Signed, Marianne B." Kate's first statement on the matter is that this is another step back, and asks what they're going to do about this, about him, before finally asking him what he did. Of course, the bought and paid for reporter was the first one at the scene and had his own way of telling it to the publicist, a revision of what was gathered from the event that followed him pulling off with Joe before his return. The resident, who was just heading back home as Joe was getting out of view, didn't see the perpetrator. All they can remember vaguely is Marianne approaching a vehicle, presumably an Uber. Either that or someone getting out of an Uber. The details conveniently become fuzzy when you consider the arrival of Marianne's initially requested ride. But before it got there, Beatrice, who heard the gunshot, was already outside on her knees mourning Marianne. Beatrice, the resident, the Uber driver, and Juliet were all taken in for questioning, but no suspects have been identified. The only thing Beatrice was able to confirm was that Marianne had a tendency to handle her business after dark, as she didn't feel safe in broad daylight since returning from the Akathis art fair in London. This is what was publicized. Kate wants to hear from Joe. What did he do? Who did he do it to? And why did he do it? Joe doesn't break eye contact with Kate the entire time they begin to have this conversation. It takes him a long while before he can even finally come out with the right words to begin his first sentence on the matter. Even then, by the time he does, he's already reconciled. He breaks down and starts to sob as he confesses. I killed her. Kate lets him continue. She was my boss, and then my lover, and I killed her. She was one of the last people to see love alive. Love scared her off, caused her to flee the country. She knew too much, but that didn't matter to me. And so I started having a mental breakdown, developed erotomania. I put her in a cage, and I didn't even realize for far too long. And then somehow, some way, she managed to fake her death. So I let her go peacefully. The thought of her taking her own life was killing me inside, but the more time went on, the more I realized no one ever found her. That was when I realized maybe I was being deceived. Maybe she was in hiding, waiting for just the right opportunity to strike. So I had to do it. I had to protect us and our future. Kate looks at Joe in silence for a noticeable period of time, before eventually getting closer to him saying, "You could have told me. You should have told me. Just like you told me about love and about Beck. To a degree, anyway." They chuckle for a moment, before Kate gets right back to business. She asks Joe if this is everything he knows about the situation with Marianne, which he insists it is. To Kate, it seems as though Joe is telling the truth, so she levels with him. But she needs to know what needs to be done in order for them to move forward. She needs to know if he's done for good. She needs to know what he plans to do about his public image. And most importantly, she needs to know if she's still safe enough to keep him where he needs to be, for each other, for the future. In truth, Joe doesn't know if he's done for good. There's been a lot of obstacles being hurled at him lately, and he explains this to Kate, though he does without the part where he has one more potential kill to mind, and how he's ambivalent about whether or not he'll have to end up doing something about landing. However, he can't better himself without challenging himself, so he lays it out for Kate by giving an oath that if another victim comes up, it won't be by his hands, and that if that turns out to be the case, then she gets to decide what happens next. She proposes a special rehab that he can't get out of. They agree by sharing a kiss, so that answers one question. But as for the others, in order for Kate to feel safe, he has to be more devoted to her safety and well-being, especially by considering how his public image could affect hers. This means that he can't have any distractions that may hinder that, so he offers to sell the bookstore to focus purely on Kate and her endeavors. Kate tells him he doesn't have to do that, as books will always be a huge part of him, but also says not to forget Henry, causing Joe to freeze. Well, getting custody may be a lot harder, but you're not going down to a fight still, are you? Of course he isn't, especially not with Kate by his side. Kate then adds that after he's successful, the door will be open for new additions to the family. Joe then adds that there's one more thing left to be done first, in order for their plans to be complete. A press rally is held the next day, presumably to give the world an opportunity to hear what Joe has to say for himself with everything that's been going on. But that's not exactly how things will end up going when Joe starts his grand opener. Not too long ago, I had the privilege of returning home to New York. When the idea was first presented to me, I called out absolute bluff, but then it happened. And here we are. And I couldn't be more thankful to be in this great city that I grew up in, where I don't have to worry about being seen, where I can be called by my own name. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to share my story, inspire others, and continue to shoot for the stars. Both the best and the worst part about it is that I didn't end there, and it's not going to anytime soon. If anyone's wondering, yes, life continues to have its ups and downs, even after you go from death to philanthropy. The crowd laughs as Joe continues. But that's the beauty of life, the good, the bad, the wins, and losses, which is why I've gathered you all here today. A lot has happened since my return. There's been entanglements, unexpected occurrences, and just unfortunate events happening all around. And as a father and a partner, I have to focus on what's best for me before I can go any further. And that extends into what's best for the residents of this fine city at this time. So today, I'm here to announce that I'm dropping out of the race for mayor of New York City, and instead taking a step back into who I was when I first started. Hands are raised, cameras flash, and the voices of those who have questions scream, but Joe isn't done. But that's not all, as now is a good time, isn't it, to share what my next move is, Joe says as he extends his arm out, inviting Kate to the podium. When she walks up to him, Joe quietly tells her, "This is it. This is probably we start to become a family. He then asks, what do you have in mind? Joe then slowly slides his fingers to her palms, maintaining eye contact as he reaches one hand to his pocket, while beginning to relax one of his legs, before being interrupted by a tug on his arm from behind, as New York State police officers place his hands behind his back, cuffing him. Joe Goldberg, you're under arrest for the murders of Kenneth Stone and Delilah Alves.